Since the start of NASCAR's next-gen era, they've gotten nearly exactly what they wanted, at least on paper. Less differentiation between the fast cars and the slow cars, and an increase in parity with nearly a record-setting number of winners every year. The problem is, fans are still unsatisfied. I'm Grant Peters, the founder of Auto Racing Analytics, and today I'm hoping to show that dominance is vital to the success of NASCAR and not just something we ought to suffer through. This is the list of the 7 most dominant cars in NASCAR's next-gen era. And as it turns out, surprisingly, even when the teams have been given a car that is exactly the same, allegedly, some teams have been able to find an edge and build a car that is just head and shoulders above the field. Race on the list, first race where the fastest car actually wins the race. Ross Chastain had the fastest car this day in COTA. He led 31 laps. What's impressive is the second fastest car is actually his teammate Daniel Suarez, who led the opening 18 laps and won the first stage. But then a lot of guys flipped the stage, and so he found himself starting out back. He goes into turn 1 and gets put on the outside of, 5 to 7 wide, gets spun out, gets a flat tire, and then he commits the cardinal sin of driving back to the pits on said flat tire, which destroyed the diffuser. I don't really remember that we knew much about that back then, but now I think we would have recognized that that was a bad idea. So the underbody of his car is destroyed. I would love to know how fast that car actually would have been if he hadn't destroyed the bottom, but that didn't happen, and yet he's still only 0.32% per lap off his teammate Chastain. Third car on the list is going to be Alex Bowman. He's 0.35% off Chastain. Bowman was only a couple 3 corners away from winning this race. He and AJ were about to battle it out in the second to final corner, and then Ross insisted that he was not going to lose, and AJ got launched into Bowman, and the rest is history. AJ had the 7th fastest car, but I should also mention the first car outside of 1% off of Ross Chastain in this race was Kyle Busch. He was down in 14th fastest. If we switch over to the 3,000-foot perspective, look above the track, this is what you see me post on Twitter a lot. If everything was based on median lap for the whole race distance, then this is where everybody would have finished on track. As you can see, pretty good back gap from Ross back to Suarez, and then Bowman right there with him. It's pretty clear to say, I think, that if this race would have just played out green and we hadn't got that rash of yellows at the end and Ross had just been able to continue on in the lead, he probably would have been able to hang on and win it comfortably. But instead, we got a really exciting finish out of it. At number 6, we have the 2024 Watkins Glen playoff race. Now, this is our second race on the list, and now the most dominant cars are going to go 1 for 2. The fastest car in this race was Shane Van Gisbergen in the number 16 for Colleague Racing. Unfortunately for Shane, he only led 1 lap of this race, and it was not the red lap. Let's talk about the second fastest car. Ross Chastain's another key protagonist in another one of these races, but this time he's not the fast car. He's the second fastest car. He's 0.32% per lap off his now Trackhouse teammate. Ross led 51 laps this race. A great performance. Obviously, there's some strategy stuff going on in there, but we don't need to go into detail on that. We had wacky strategy. We had guys trying to go for stage points, guys going for wins. All that gets leveled anyway by the late race restart situation that tends to happen on these road courses where we get a series of late race restarts and it's just chaos anyway. Your third fastest car is Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher, for the bulk of the race, is 0.65% off of Shane Van Gisbergen. That's nearly half a second. That is a chunk. That is a sizable margin, but Buescher starts with the lead and Van Gisbergen starts back in third, and we get a series of restarts. Some go well, some don't. Eventually, the final one, Van Gisbergen gets into Buescher, and he clears into the lead, and then Van Gisbergen should drive off with it, given that he's got half a second in hand, theoretically, over Buescher. But that did not happen. Instead, he clipped the wall, headed into the bus stop chicane, and Buescher then plows his way through, and the rest is history. You know the story. The first car outside of 1% is actually Chase Briscoe. The thing is, Chase Briscoe's got the 4th fastest car. That's how much Shane Van Gisbergen had in hand over the field. Briscoe had 3/4 of a second to gain to be as fast as Van Gisbergen, so he was quite a ways out. But Shane, heck of a car, heck of a drive. He had the speed, just wasn't meant to be. And Chris Buescher, man, what an effort to stay with Van Gisbergen in a car that's half a second a lap slower. It's a great win for him. Unfortunately, that makes our dominant car win percentage now 50%. Let's take a look at this race from above. Van Gisbergen, as we know, would have been the winner. Chastain, pretty good ways back. Buescher, not even into the backstretch chicane yet, where he inevitably ended up winning this race. Quite a ways back, and Briscoe nearly a lap down. We're about to see some cars get lapped here shortly. And this is the part of the video where we have a problem. So this is 6B, not 5. I made the title for this video before I did the research, and I know that YouTube likes the number 7, so I wasn't going to have an 8-car list, and I didn't want to kick COTA off the list, but I didn't really want to include this race anyway. So this is 6B, not 5, and you're just going to have to deal with it. I'll explain why I didn't want this on the list here in a moment. Kyle Busch was the fastest car, but that car got DQ'd because of the piece of tape that JGR put underneath the wrap, and NASCAR decided that that was hampering with the parts of the next-gen car. You know, it's up for debate if the punishment fit the crime. I'm going to go with probably not, but at the same time, I don't think that these teams make mistakes like that. I think everything they do to these cars more than likely is for a reason and not oversight, but it probably didn't need to be taken that serious. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. He got DQ'd, and NASCAR decided Chase Elliott won the race because they DQ'd Denny Hamlin for the exact same thing. It is what it is. So Kyle Busch had the fastest car, but he didn't cross the finish line first anyway. The second fastest car, there was enough drama in this race without the DQs. Ross Chastain, he's just a little bit under 0.2 slower than Busch per lap. He's at 0.34%, so we're off the 0.32 number now. Ross Chastain actually had a chance to win this race in that car. Kyle Busch, he led a race-high 63 laps, but with 38 to go, he lost the lead to Chastain, who then led for a lap and then immediately lost the race lead to the third fastest car, Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin is 0.35% off of Kyle Busch. He's at 0.3 of a second down to Busch. But that doesn't really tell the whole story, because if you just look at the final 40 laps of the race, then Denny Hamlin is actually going to be the fastest car. So this number doesn't really tell the whole story, because Hamlin spent so much of the race in traffic. It's that traffic number's dragging his full race speed down. But in the fourth quarter, when he got clean air on the nose, that car was just as good, if not arguably better than the 18. Ross, he gave it a good run for his money. We got a late race restart. Chastain hung it around the outside, and this is the race where, if people remember, Hamlin decided to get Ross back, and he just didn't lift. And he gave Ross a choice to either lift or hit the fence, and, well, Ross doesn't really lift, so we got this mess. Either way, Denny Hamlin goes on to cross the finish line first, and then NASCAR hands the win to Chase Elliott because, I don't know, we like Chase Elliott here. And then I guess we should mention that the first car over 1% back is in 12th place. That's Kevin Harvick here at Pocono. That amounts to a little over half a second. If you look at this race from above, Kyle Busch up front, Chastain in the middle of that long straightaway between 1 and 2, Hamlin way back on entry to 1, and Harvick is in red because he's actually a lap down to Kyle Busch. Now for the real number 5 on the list, we have the 2023 Michigan race. I've actually gone back and watched this one for fun because, as it turns out, it's a pretty competitive race, which is really weird, given that this is a video about dominant cars, and yet here's our 4th race that we're talking about, and all 4 have been hotly contested. Strange how that works. Fastest car was Martin Truex Jr., but we got a tie for the second fastest car. Truex led not a race high, but quite a few laps at 47 out of the 200. Our biggest leader was actually Chris Buescher. He led 52 laps. He and Denny Hamlin are tied for the second fastest car at 0.35% off of Truex. That number just continues to crawl up just a little bit with each race. And then our next fastest car is actually Chris Buescher's teammate, Brad Keselowski. He's 0.5% off of the fastest median lap set by Truex. And if we step back a little bit, the 15th fastest car, Austin Cindric, is your first car outside of this race. Saw the final lead change happen with 12 laps to go. It was a tight battle between Truex and Buescher, and it was just kind of one of those standoffs of you just don't know when somebody's gonna get the lead and run away with it. And eventually Buescher was the guy to do it, but we're going to see a theme here coming up of races in which Truex has really fast cars. If we go to the above view, Truex with the win, Hamlin and Buescher all the way back exiting turn 2, Keselowski in the, technically 4th spot, nearly a lap down. Austin Cindric, I put him in purple because he's technically 2 laps down. Pretty astronomical margins in this race, despite the small percentage, just because of the size of the track and the number of laps and speeds, and it gets out of hand quickly. At number 4 on the list, we have the 2023 Loudon, New Hampshire event. This was a pretty standard Truex win, honestly. He had the fastest car. He led 254 out of the 301 laps and won the race in dominating fashion. You could make an argument, actually, that this race should be higher on this list. I'll explain that in a minute. But either way, Truex, he took the lead for the final time with 24 to go. It was pretty standard race for Truex. There were a few cautions late. Actually, he was able to do a good job on all the restarts and get it done. That wasn't always the case for him in this season. He's improved on restarts in his final year in 2024, but 2023, not quite as kind to him on this restarts. But it didn't matter. He survived them all. He goes on to win. Your second fastest car, this is where you could argue that this should be higher on the list, actually crashed out, but he did run over half the race. He crashed out at a pretty convenient time where I feel like his speed is vaguely representative, so I've left him in. Aric Almirola, he's 0.38% per lap off of Martin Truex Jr., always fast at New Hampshire. Your third fastest car, a guy who actually did run all of the laps, is Ryan Blaney. He's 0.53% off of Martin Truex Jr., which is an absolutely massive number. The crazy thing is he actually finished outside the top 20. It's Joey Logano, Kyle Larson who bring it home second and third. Those two were 8th and 7th fastest in this race, respectively. Either way, Truex brings home the win. Your 12th fastest car is your first car outside the 1% mark. That's Bubba Wallace. I'm really excited to get to the above shot of this, because if this whole race was based, all 301 laps, entirely on median lap rank, this is where all the cars would have finished on track. Truex laps the field. Aric Almirola, if he had, not crashed out of the race, we're placing him a lap down, coming off of turn 4. Ryan Blaney, he's a good lap and a half behind. Obviously, being a short track, Bubba Wallace at the 1% mark is going to put him 3 laps down. But yeah, this was a dominating victory by Truex. This is one of our first really, truly dominant cars. There's only a few on this list that I'm like, wow, this was truly an impressive car. This is the first one, but it goes up from here yet. At number 3 on the list, we have the 2024 Chicago race. NASCAR on the streets of Chicago produced a dominant car, kind of. This one's weird. So I think we can all agree that at the end of this race, for anyone that watched, we can all know that Tyler Reddick was the fastest guy here. But this is one of the cases where the stats don't agree. Median lap rank takes into account, obviously, the whole of the race. It takes into account every lap that happened. And so Alex Bowman, having put himself on what ended up being the correct strategy and more competitive laps, total laps, than Tyler Reddick. And so his median lap comes out better. Tyler Reddick finds himself 0.41% off of Alex Bowman. This race is weird. That's just the truth. It just is a strange race that finds itself here. I actually don't need to go to fourth place or any lower to find a car that's 1% out, because the third fastest car, Ty Gibbs, is actually 1.32% off of Alex Bowman. There was rain. It was shortened. This thing was a mess. I don't even know what to think. I mean, who's to say what happens if Shane Van Gisbergen doesn't crash out early in this one? Alex Bowman only led 8 laps, but Reddick didn't lead a single lap. Gibbs led 17. I don't know, man. This one's weird, but we love weird, fun NASCAR, and it gave us a fun finish. Either way, if we look at this thing from above, if the whole race had played out green, this is where all the cars would have finished on track. This one's hard to tell because this is street circuit. Look, I'm dealing with Google Maps. Bear with me. Bowman's at the start and finish line by the park. Reddick's entering that long bend thing. And then Ty Gibbs is just about to go a lap down in the third fastest car. Either way, this one was weird. We've got 2 to go on the list, though. And these are some cars. We've got a couple cars to go. Currently, the dominant cars are 3 for 5. As we head to number 2 on our list, it's the 2024 Gateway Race. Christopher Bell had a monster of a car at this race. The problem is, it also is what shot him in the foot when the car blew up. He's 0.48% faster than Ryan Blaney per lap in this race. And then Ryan Blaney pretty well deserved to win this race too. But the problem is it turns out, if you don't put enough gas in the car, you're not going to make it. Yeah. It's tough to see this one not go the way of the dominant car, or not even the second fastest car, because those were both really, really fast race cars. Christopher Bell, this is when I think we all bookmarked him as the favorite to win the championship. Obviously, that didn't end up coming to fruition anyway, but here's something people aren't ready to hear. If Bell wins this race, it's 5 more playoff points. Then we don't have the whole, teammate problem at Martinsville, the Chevy Toyota thing, and Bell goes to the Final Four, and who's to say what happens then? We'll never know. But either way, Christopher Bell, he led a race high 80 laps. He still brought the car home 7th as the motor was done with him. Ryan Blaney runs out of gas, finishes way down the order in 24th, last car in the lead lap, and Austin Cindric ends up with the win. He led 53 laps on the day. Good for Austin Cindric getting his first non-drafting oval win. You know, sometimes they happen this way. You still earn it. Austin Dillon is actually the 3rd fastest car, not Austin Cindric, at over 0.5% off of Christopher Bell. Strangely enough, this lists Austin Dillon as basically similar speed to Ryan Blaney, only 0.5 off per lap. That's 0.02%. That's a good car. That's really good stuff from the 3. We would see this show up later at Richmond, but I will say this 6th place finish here, this should stand out to people. I think that RCR they were figuring some things out here. First car over 1% back is William Byron down in 14th. Let's take a look at what this looks like when we run the whole race out based on median lap rank, or based on median lap. Christopher Bell, he puts a whole lap into Blaney and into Austin Dillon. They're exiting turn 4. William Byron, that 1% mark is going to be 2 laps down. And finally, the number 1 most dominant car in the next-gen era is Kyle Larson's number 5 Hendrick Motorsports Valvoline Chevrolet in the 2022 Dixie Vodka 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. I mean, this car is basically like a large part of why my page is what it is. This race is the pinned tweet on Auto Racing Analytics. You've probably seen it before because this car still, to this day, it makes me happy to see that even though we have a kit Lego car today, even though the next-gen car is able to be built the same and all the parts are the same and all the teams have equal opportunity to put a perfect setup in it, whatever, there's still a possibility that a team hits it right. And more importantly, that there's a driver that is just so good that you can't overcome that. Kyle Larson led 199 of the 267 laps. This is not Truex Coke 600 levels of dominant, but man, in my opinion, it's more impressive because he did it in the next-gen car. Kyle Larson led the final 22 laps this race after stealing it from Martin Truex Jr., and he is the fastest in this race by 0.63% per lap over Martin Truex Jr. That's over 0.2 a lap, which doesn't sound like much, but the percentage, 0.63% per lap, is crazy. That's bigger than the gap to 3rd for almost all of these races. I mean, drop that weird Chicago one, but that's an oddity. Either way, the next fastest car, the 3rd fastest car, is Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain, who brought it home 2nd in this race. He's over a full percent back. We don't even have to go to a 4th car. If you want to go and see the version on my Twitter, it's less neat. But here is how this race would have played out based on median lap, just purely extrapolating median lap speed over the whole 267 laps. Kyle Larson puts a full lap, almost 2 laps, into 2nd place Martin Truex Jr., and he puts Ross Chastain 2 laps down, almost 3. This car was incredible, and this is the kind of performance that should be appreciated. Even still, there were parts of this race that were exciting. These are the 7 most dominant cars so far in NASCAR's next-gen era. And if you were even remotely entertained by this video, then I think I've done my job of showing that dominance doesn't necessarily mean boring. Dominance is something that superstars do and something that generates storylines. Dominance also doesn't mean bad races. COTA had a last lap pass and an exciting finish. Pocono had a moment that NASCAR used for marketing for the rest of the season and will probably use again when Pocono comes up later this year. Gateway had a dramatic finish with cars running out of gas and blowing up. And Homestead had phenomenal racing start to finish, and we will all continue to remember the show that was put on by Kyle Larson in that race, because he did something that not everyone else could do. Without dominance, there are no superstars. And believe it or not, NASCAR's not about the cars, it's not about the tracks, and it's not about the sanctioning body. It's about the stars, the drivers, and not every one of them can be a star, and that's okay. With this in mind, I'd like to see NASCAR allow the stars to shine even more by opening up the playing field just a little bit. Maybe that's more horsepower, maybe that's less grip via tire compound or size, maybe that's less downforce, or maybe that's just giving the teams more room in the rules for ingenuity. But these are questions that will not fit in this video. To support my work and continue to see more data like what you saw in this video, go over to autoracinganalytics.com and subscribe. Thanks for watching.